We're going to go through the first 160, well, at least the first 12 steps of the book. We may get to some stuff in the back, but let's just get started because we got a lot of stuff to cover. Open your book to page XI. Here's the deal. When this book was written in 1939, it had to contain all the information for recovery. There weren't any meetings to go to, very few, if any. There wasn't AA meetings, there wasn't book studies, there wasn't anything like what we see today. So it was, if you lived in Arkansas and you bought a book for $3.50 and they put it in the mail to you and you got it, it had to have all the information you need to recover because there wasn't any fellowship yet. There was no strength to lean back on, nobody to take your cue from. So it had to contain everything. Therefore, we're going to talk about the program contained in the text, not my program, not your program, not your sponsors, not standing by the doors, not anybody else's. The one that's contained in the text, because that's the one we know works. I don't know if my deviation would hurt you. I'm not going to try to qualify myself as an alcoholic. I'll just kind of do that as we go along. If you have any doubts, come see me. I can get you references. And the most important thing we had to do this, one guy had to have these 3 pieces of information necessary to recover. That's a lot what we're going to talk about today. Steps 1, 2, and 2. We'll get into 3 maybe. So he had to know what the problem was, step 1. Because my understanding of a solution, my willingness to take a solution is only going to be as good as my understanding of the problem. Very important. That's why it says step 1 is so important. So go down the second paragraph, page XI. Because this book has become the basic text for our society, has helped such large numbers of alcoholics and men and women to recovery. Okay, the first thing we know from that is we're talking about a text. The textbook is written for one reason. That's for the person that wrote the book to pass on the information he has to the person who doesn't have it yet. In this case, Bill Wilson had these 3 pieces of information and he put them in a textbook. This is a textbook. It's a manual for recovery. It's not really that fun reading all the time. I know it's not a novel or anything like that. But all the info to recover has to be contained in here. Because when it was written, there wasn't any other option. Go to turn one page over to XIII. So this text had to contain this, and it's a book of experience. Let's get that out of the way right now. This book is a book of experience. These people experienced this thing. These first 100, Bill wrote it, but a lot of people had their hands in editing and making suggestions all the way through it. Some good, some of them not so good if you read the original. But it had to be correct or it wouldn't work. It would have been long gone. What's that, 83 years or something? It would have been long gone by now if it didn't work. I know it works because this is the way I recovered. I can sit up here and tell you from experience this works. The people that wrote the book are telling you from their experience there's a solution. There's a way out of this mess. First we got to know what the mess is. First full paragraph. To show other alcoholics how we recovered is the main purpose of this book. Precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. So you just don't have the strength. You don't have the courage to just say no. And for a lot of people, it didn't work. So the Towns Hospital was in Manhattan Borough, New York City. And you had to not only just have money to get into it, you had to know somebody to get into it. And Bill's brother-in-law was a doctor, and his mother was a fairly important person in the town. And they were able to get him admitted into this. While he was there, he found out from the doctor, I lost my pace. What was it? 7. He found out from the doctor what the problem was. Dr. William D. Silkworth wasn't an alcoholic, but at the time he wrote the doctor's opinion, he had worked with thousands of alcoholics, and he developed this theory, this opinion, this just he had an idea what was causing this, and he shared that with Bill. So Bill was given this information, and here's what he told Bill. Turn to page XXVIII, first full paragraph.
We believe. XXVIII. Three eyes.
Yeah, I might back up one.
Yeah. Starts out, we believe.
Back up start there, then we'll come back. We'll go back to XXVI, but start out there. Yeah, go ahead and read it.
We believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy. That the phenomenon of drinking is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. And once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon human things, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve.
First piece of information Bill had to have. What's physically wrong with me that separates me from these other people? And Dr. Silkworth had this theory. He said there were two questions that came in. When everybody came in, the first question, why can't I stop once I start? He said they asked him this question over and over and over. He developed a theory that they had a physical abnormality, a physical difference from most people. That what happened was whenever they drank, something happened physically inside. Same way with a drug user. I took a drink, I did a drug, and I got this little thing that he calls a craving in here. I call it a physical craving just to make sure we understand the difference. This can't start until I put it in my system. And if I have it, it may not start every time. But I have to know I have this problem. In fact, turn back to where I said, 2 pages back, one page, XXVI. Underneath his first letter, you'll see the physician who at our request gave us this letter has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views and other statement which follows. In this statement, he confirms what we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe. Must believe. We're going to find out why we have so much trouble with this. Does it sound like that might be important? The physical part of this often gets overlooked when we get hung up on the obsession being removed and everything, but we can't ever forget that our body is different from about 90% of the, who knows now with all the drugs going on, but at the time it was written, it was thought that about 10% of the people had this body, this physical problem, that when they put it in their system, they couldn't control the amount. This craving started. Craving led them to a second drink. Craving got twice as big, led them to a third drink. Now they got that gorilla, and what's going to happen? From your own experience, what happens? Yeah, we can't control this amount of this poison we put in. Anybody ever done a little bit of math? Or I had 2 lines of Coke out and I did half of one line, said I'm good.
That's all I had, yeah.
I'm good for now. I'll come back in a couple of days and do the rest.
Yeah.
That's how our brains will tell us. I have to know that my body is, and all abnormal means, it means not the same as the majority, okay? If there were 10 women in here and 20 men, the women would be abnormal. Or the other way around, don't get all smart. So I have to know I have this. I'll tell you how important it is. Turn to page, I think 30. About halfway down. We alcoholics are men and women. We alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. We know that no real alcoholic ever recovers control. All is felt at times we were regaining control. But such intervals, usually brief, are inevitably followed by still less control. He said control 4 times in here, in a couple of sentences, which led in time to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. That's that alcoholic torture, that addict's torture that he's talking about, where I just don't know what's going on. We are convinced to a man that alcoholics of our type are in the grips of a progressive illness. Over any considerable period of time, we get worse, never better. That means I have this thing in my body when I was 42 and got sober. Now it's, no, even though I'm not drinking, haven't had a drink in almost 30 years, still, that I have to know that allergy has gotten worse. How many of you have had some periods of sobriety and gone back out and said, I'm just going to have a couple of drinks, and ended up going off to the races? You didn't get start over, did you? You thought, well, I've been sober a year. I can start all over now. And you don't get to. It picks right back up and usually worse than where it left off. That's why it doesn't. This physical difference does not stop. Here's what he compares it to. He says, we are like men who have lost their legs. They never grow new ones. Neither does there appear to be any kind of treatment which will make alcoholics of our kind like other men. We have tried every imaginable remedy. In some instances, we have been brief recovery followed by a still worse relapse. Physicians who are familiar with alcoholism agree there's no such thing as making a normal drinker out of an alcoholic. Science may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet. If I have this never goes away. That's why I will always be an alcoholic or an addict, because I have this body. The body, you have to know this. Because the minute you believe you don't have this body anymore, your mind will tell you, probably have a couple of beers. Sam says, I can probably have a couple of beers. No? But if I believe that lie, what's going to happen? Because I can't control the amount I take, here I go. Now, if that was the only problem, the solution's really simple. We don't have to work steps. We don't have to do anything. What would be the solution be if that's your only part of your problem? Quit drinking. Just stop. The infamous ad campaign, just say no. Would have worked. And but here's the deal, that works for some people because they can see the truth that, hey, I can't do this anymore. And they were able to stop. That's okay. That's okay. But we have more to it than that. Go to back to page XXVIII. Second part of remember twofold illness? That's the first fold. Here's the second fold. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced. Though they admit is injurious, they cannot after time differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. Boy, is that true? Yeah. Because the people that don't drink and use like we do aren't in our lives that much any more time we get here, are they? No. Yeah, we always say we burn bridges. We don't burn bridges. We're too selfish to burn bridges. They burn the bridge.
I got to the point where, like, if you were sober, I did not want to be around you.
Yeah, we can't. We don't relate. We don't grasp. Nobody grasps. To them, their alcoholic life seems only normal, and they are restless, irritable, and discontent. Anybody relate to that?
Yeah. Every day.
Until they can again experience the sense of the effect, the sense of ease and comfort that comes once they put that into their system. Once I put that in my system, I get this. I get a large, in charge, debt-free, smarter than ever, and probably have a tremendous job if I'm in a bar and hitting on somebody. I'm probably president of IBM or something by then. I was debt-free as long as I had a checkbook. Right? As long as I take checks, money is a problem. We get stupid is what happens because we can't control the amount we put in our system. Where these people don't get that. These normal drinkers have a drink or two, they get a tipsy, nauseous, out of control feeling, and they say something I never said I don't remember ever saying this in my life. No thanks, I've had enough. Oh, that's enough for me, boy, I'm feeling that. And I'm going, well, what else would you be doing if you weren't feeling it? You know the types. They have a bunch of fruit in their drink and maybe a little umbrella and all that stuff and a little splash of something. You're going, that's alcohol abuse right there. That's worse than anything I can think of. After they have succumbed to the desire again. Okay, Silky calls this thing a desire. After they have succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, the phenomena of craving, that's the allergy, this physical craving kicks in. Phenomena of craving develops and they pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful, singing the alcoholic's national anthem.
Never do it again.
Swear I'll never do it again. And we mean it, likely. If we had enough pain the night before, the week before, the month before, I swear I'm done, it's over with, I can't do this. Who do we swear to? God.
Everybody.
Who else?
Mom.
Anybody will listen, yeah. How about our bosses? We ever swore to our boss? And he was like, well, it's okay, because Mitch said he'd never going to do it again. I said, everybody goes, yeah, hang on, buddy. Yeah. Who's sworn to their PO they'll never do it again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I bet the PO's really impressed, isn't he? Or she. They go, that's great. You're violated. This is repeated over and over. Unless this person can experience over and over and over. Unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of his recovery. Psychic change means my thinking has to change. And I can't change myself. That's the catch. This obsession. Go to page 30 again. I think. Most of us are unwilling to admit we're real alcoholics. No person likes to think he's bodily. See it? Bodily and mentally different from his fellows. Therefore, it's not surprising our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday he will control and enjoy his drinking is a great obsession to every abnormal drinker. If I controlled, I didn't enjoy it. For a long time. Now I couldn't have any control anyway. But if I tried to control it, it was horrible. I'd rather have no drinks than 2 drinks.
Yeah.
I'd rather have no drinks than 10 drinks. Because it wasn't going to work. I never once ever controlled and enjoyed my drinking or drug use. If I had to control it, it wasn't fun. Yeah, that might work. So, the idea that somehow, someday, we control and enjoy his drinking is a great obsession. Everywhere in the rest of the book, Bill Wilson, the author, calls this desire an obsession of the mind. Turn to page 23. Show you how important this is. This is why we can easily, if we're not careful, forget about how important, how knowing our body is different is. First of all, an obsession, by definition, thought or idea more powerful than any thought or idea I can have. With me? Second, it's always going to be a lie in the area of the first drink or drug. I'm going to have to believe I don't have this body. That's a lie it's going to tell me every time. That it'll be different this time. How many of you started out their last one on, it'll be different this time? Yeah? Yeah. I mean, we get 6 DUIs in a row. 6 times we drive, so we do it 7th time, we figure the odds are with us, right? Nobody's going to get 7 in a row. That's how we think. It's that same thing about 4, 5, and 6, too. And it will not respond to reason. How many of you had a reason? How many have a reason right now not to drink again? Not to use or drink? Raise your hand if you have a reason. Okay, now put them down. Now, put them back up if you had that same reason last time you used. And the time before that. And the time before that. Reason will not work. This obsession is too powerful. Thought or idea more powerful than any thought or idea. Always going to be a lie and does not listen to any reasons to do it. Reasons don't stand a chance against this thing. Once you've got it. That's what a real alcoholic looks like. Page 23 tells us why this is important. Top of the page. These observations would be academic and pointless. That means they wouldn't matter. What he's done here is about a page and a half, but what happens, he's given us about a page and a half of the dumb crap we do right here. But relate to anything, you can come up with your own, couldn't you? Have you ever done anything on a spree they wouldn't have done otherwise, sober? Like, have you ever done anything on a spree you would have done sober? That's more my question. These observations will be academic and pointless. Our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. The drink is preceded by thought. That's the obsession. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body, which answered the second question everybody had for Silky: why can't I stop starting? Silky said, you're powerless to keep from picking up again, and you're powerless to control it when you do. Pretty much I'm screwed. Nearly 100% fatality list. If I got this thing, I'm faced with early death and a miserable life. Or the other stuff that goes with it. Yeah. Because it's painful. This is that state of mind we're in that it's a state of mind that puts us in a place. You ever been in a room with 100 people in it and you feel like you're the only one in there? That's what it feels like. And then when you drink, it gets out of control, and that's what everybody remembers you for. But they don't know the pain you had to go through to get there. That's probably enough on step one. Isn't it? Had enough? No way. Questions about that cycle? I know some of you have seen it so many times you can do it yourself by heart. Some of you have been up here doing it, I think. Let's go to drop down. Stay right where we're at. If you ask him why he started in the last bender, chances are he'll offer you any of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses make sense, have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. They sound like philosophy of a man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so he can't feel the ache. If you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, he'll laugh it off or become irritable and refuse to talk. I have to see this. I'll tell you how important this part is. Go to bottom page 31. Kind of left that one out. This is how important it is. This body part is super important. If you look at the bottom of page 31, it says, we do not like to pronounce any individual as alcoholic. Here's one thing. This thing requires 100% self-diagnosis. I can tell you have this all day long. I can tell you're an alcoholic all day long. It means nothing until the miracle of seeing the truth in that soaks in. That I'm doomed to an alcoholic death. Silky called this the verdict of inevitable doom. That if it's not bad, if you think it's bad yet, it's going to get worse. It's the old story of, see if anybody relates to this in their life. Back when, I had a little trouble. I was going along pretty good. And life kind of took this little dip. Seemed like there's probably alcohol or drugs involved there. But I came back out of it. And then it went a little longer. And like this. And there's my life. Now look here. The good times of now are so far below the bad times of before. And there's more coming if you don't die. That's what you're faced with here. Does anybody relate to this? Is their life? If we're honest and we think back to 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 10 years ago, a long time ago maybe, we thought things were horrible then, didn't we? And looking back on them now, I'd got to just like get back to that spot.
Yeah.
Can't do it because this thing is it rolls downhill, never uphill. It's a evil. I just call it evil. Better stay with that. Where was I? 31. Okay. Here's how important knowing you have this body is. He says, nowhere in the big book in the first 164 pages does it say don't drink. Huh? You kidding me? That's what I've always heard. Don't drink and go to meetings is the solution. Well, I can't. Hopefully you're seeing here, I cannot not drink. Why can't I not drink? Because I got an obsession of mine that says it'll be okay. And why can't I control it when I take it, even though I said I'm going to? Because I got a body that does control. How important do you think it is to know you have that body? He says, step over the nearest bar room and try a little controlled drinking. Try it more than once. It's worth a bad case of the jitters to find out. If you have any doubt in your mind, any doubt whatsoever, go do some controlled drinking. I don't care if you leave the program or not. That's how important it is, because you're not going to get this until you see that truth. You will not recover until you see that. Well, that sounded terrible, didn't it? Sure got quiet. That's how important it is. This program is not going to get you sober. It's just a vehicle. It's just another aid. The steps in the book aren't going to get, memorizing this book is not going to get you sober. I have to have this, I have to know the depth and weight of my problem. This isn't a little speed bump on the road of life. It's a death sentence if you got it. It's no different from having slow-moving cancer. And it's probably going to be a lot uglier than cancers I've seen. Because when you ever see anybody die of cirrhosis, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And today, we don't have the time we used to. With all these designer drugs and stuff, this instant death that's floating around. And this is how crazy we are. This is how strong this thing is. We have somebody overdoses, and we want to know where'd they get it?
Right.
Not so there can be any repercussions, so we can get what they got. Because we're so insane, we think we can just do it a little bit different, it'll be all right. And then we die too. Funeral after funeral after funeral, death after death. And I would say between alcohol and drugs, this is probably taking 250,000 lives a year right now in the United States. And I may be conservative on that. See, here's something you don't know. Alcoholism is 95 to 100,000 every year, year in and year out. A lot of you didn't know that, did you? Because those alcoholics, I'm a drug addict, they don't know how to have fun, right? Or I only do healthy, I only know smoke non-habit forming natural marijuana. And they drink. Or the other way around. You ought to hear the old time alcoholics talk. Like they wouldn't have done it if they were around, but yeah, these old timers. Yeah. See one of those tablet guys? Yeah, it's sort of something like that. So questions? I mean, you've heard that about a dozen times. Never know when it's going to soak in.
Never gets old.
Never know. So if I don't think I have this body, go drink. Book's very clear. It says go drink, because if you don't see this truth, there won't probably be any, there can't be a recovery, because you don't know what you're recovering from. So look back on your own history. Is this how I drank and used? Did I drink like a pig? Did I use like a pig? Did I control it? Did I try to control? I don't know, like you guys, when I had Coke, it was like, I'd get some big quantities and say, okay, this is gonna last me a month. And 3 days later, I'm peeking out the blinds with doors up against all my chairs, trying to figure out who's coming in and stealing my Coke from me. It was me. Wasn't anybody coming in. Because I didn't want to share it with anybody. That was my secret stash. I've never done step one that quick. Am I leaving anything out? What am I leaving out? Nothing? Okay. If this is a problem, what's the solution?
Admitting this.
Here's the deal. If you're right there, I don't know. Looks like I'm doomed.
You gotta believe.
Looks like I'm doomed. Turn the page. Yes, sir.
Isn't it like the thing is to get a different mindset and just continue down
Yeah.
the steps every day?
Sorta. That's exactly what it is, but how you get that different mindset is the key to the whole thing.
Awakening.
Well, we'll get there.
I read a little thing and watched a video that said just in the United States, not with drugs, but alcohol alone, a minimum 8% of people get that euphoria when they drink, where it's like not the same as everybody else. It like basically they can drink a 3-pack a day, still be fully functioning, get like when that euphoria hits them, it's like increased motor skills, you know what I mean? They don't get sloppy drunk like everyone else. That's the allergy there.
Could also be the obsession telling you, I'm different.
Yeah.
I'm different from the rest of those guys. Look at page 8 real quick. Bill Wilson wrote this book, and he tells in his own story. Got to remember, if you read this story, he's tried everything. Everything was available then. He kept thinking he had it. He said, on the second paragraph on page 8, this is where Bill Wilson actually takes step 1. He says, no words can tell the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass, that means swamp, with self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. Step 1 is not a step of surrender. Surrender implies we have a choice. Turn to page 24. Now I'm starting to get all over the place, aren't I?
No.
Here's a great summary of step 1. It's even in squiggly writing. That's italics, for those that don't understand what squiggly is. And if it's in italics in this book, it's considered he's really trying to make a point here. He's trying to stress this point. He says, the fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent, and we are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness, our memory, with sufficient force, the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We, on our unaided power, what's it say, are without defense against the first drink. Alcoholism and addiction is a train getting ready to steamroll us, and we're on the tracks and we can't get off of them. That's what's going to happen. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but we're going to get run over. It's going to take us out. Now, Bill, when he went back to the doctor the second to last time, back to page 7, I think. Second, third, who knows? He went 3 or 4 times. He went, and they aren't sure. They can't really be sure by the record. Yeah, I know, but later on he wrote 4. My incredible, right in the middle. My incredible behavior in the face of a desperate desire to stop was explained. So Bill had this information. He had this same thing you've just gotten. Understanding myself now, I fared forth in high hope. For 3 or 4 months, the goose hung high. You know what goose hung high means?
No.
I looked it up. I always thought it meant I had something to eat and it was hanging up and drying out. They say the goose hung high, this is an old superstition from the 1800s, that when the geese were flying, if they were high up in the air, flying, the weather was nice and there wasn't any problems. If they were low, there was troubles. There was going to be bad weather, and because the weather was bad, the goose were flying low. So for the goose to hang high meant things were going really good. This superstition said that when it hung low, those were evil spirits. It was superstition. It's not biblical or anything like that, but I thought that was kind of interesting. When he said things are going great. You know, he wasn't drinking, knew all about himself, knew all about his inner workings. I got this one down, he says. The goose hung high. I went to town regularly and even made a little money. Surely this was the answer. Self-knowledge. So Bill knew he had this obsession. He knew why he couldn't stop starting. He knew he had the body of an alcoholic. He knew why he couldn't stop once he started. And he says, knowing this, I got no problems now. Look what happened. But it was not. For the frightful day came when I drank once more. The curve of my declining moral and bodily health fell off like a ski jump. At the time I returned to the hospital, it was a finish. He gave up. Given up. And he says, alcohol was my master. That means alcohol, the obsession to use, has total control. And it's not walking around telling you that. It's walking around saying nice things. The obsession doesn't appear ugly, does it?
No.
I think we have time to compare this. I wasn't going to, but I guess we have more time than I thought. I must talk faster. I must talk faster than I do.
You've got sight.
Who's, let's see, who can I pick on? Favorite, Shannon? Favorite hot movie star? Besides me.
John Travolta.
John,
You just teased it.
What?
You have one dog.
it's her. Hey, to each his own. Here, I'm going, he's just a kid. Okay, John Travolta. Shannon goes to the dance. Shannon goes to the dance, and John Travolta's there. Probably got his disco outfit on and everything still. He's there, and he looks at Shannon, and he goes, come here, baby. That's my best John Travolta. Come here, baby. And Shannon goes, ha. She's like slobbering and walking over to him and shaking, and she thinks this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me in my life. And they go out and start dancing. And they dance a little bit. She's really enjoying herself. Look at me, girls. I'm dancing with Big John. And then all of a sudden there's this thing on her shoulder, this whack, whack, whack on her shoulder. She turns around. It's a 500-pound gorilla. And John Travolta's walking off, leaving her with the gorilla. And the gorilla grabs her, picks her up, and starts slamming her onto the floor. Just smashing her in, just smashing her. She gets all done and crawls out of that place, just crawling on her belly, and they call an ambulance, come and get her, take her to the hospital. Months go by while she's broken bones and recovering from all that trauma of dancing with John Travolta. And she decides one night, I'll go back to the dance, I'll go back there, I just won't dance. Even if John's there. Yeah. And she goes back, John's there. He's going, hey, baby. And she's going, no. Come on now, it'll be different this time. And she says, okay. Dancing with John again. Same thing happens. She dances for a little bit, gorilla shows up, starts whacking her, and this goes on until the gorilla kills her. Okay, best example I can give you. This is John Travolta. Pretty, attractive, appealing. Sounds like a great deal, doesn't it? And this is the gorilla that kills. Obsession, allergy. If we got it, we're in trouble. We'll take a break and come back at 1 and talk. Some of us learned it today. Some of us are going to have to go back out and try again to find out if we have that body. Just knowing this, like Bill Wilson, self-knowledge changes nothing. I just took step 1, nothing changed. All it is, I know that I'm doomed. I know that I have this fatal illness, nearly 100% fatal illness that's going to take me out of here, cause me to die before my time, and life's going to suck. till I get there. I don't know, some of you were like I was. Dying sounded really good.
Yeah.
What woke me up was when somebody showed me the problem. I realized it meant I didn't get to die right away, that I was going to probably live 15 or 20 more years in that hell on earth of this. And you can take your own little snapshot of yourself, how many lies and cons and deceptions and thefts and just stuff that we always felt guilty and shameful for went on just because of this. And we beat ourselves up for it. One more thing, if you're one of these people that have beaten yourself up after you have relapsed, if you want to call it that, after a period of sobriety, you went out and got drunk, and you're in a detox and you're beating yourself up and feeling terrible and, oh, I'm a piece of crap like everybody has told me my whole life, or I'm no good, or all those other words I'm not going to use since we're filming this. And you believe that, then you don't see step one. Here's the deal. If I have this thing in my head, the time and place will come, I will drink again. Nothing's going to change that. As long as and alcohol is, the obsession's cunning, baffling, powerful, and very patient. Some of us spend an uncomfortable period of time, and this is still there, and finally we have to give into it, and then we beat ourselves up. Did anybody sign up for the obsession somewhere? No. They got to Walmart and said, I need an obsession. And then give them money to get it? Anybody, did you on birth, did you say, boy, I hope that I bet your parents said, boy, I hope they has that allergy to alcohol and drugs. No, we didn't sign up for any of this. The recruiter didn't come by the high school and say, who's here for AA? Right? Well, some of you might have. The POs weren't looking for you. We don't go to jail or prison because of this. We go for jail or prison because of things we do, the laws we break. This is not a defense anymore. It worked for a little while there, I remember, but anymore you're not arrested. You're not in trouble you're usually in trouble for things we do down here. But our out of control lives will stay out of control no matter how hard we try. Why will trying not work? Because I don't have any power. That's simple. But I'm trying so hard. Quit trying. If I have this, there's a solution. If you want to try some other way, go ahead. But I know one that works, and that's what we're going to talk about now. Page 44. Remember what I left out, Skip? I'll dig it out here, maybe. Preceding chapters, you learned something of alcoholism. We hope we've made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. If, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely. Why? Why, though? Why can I not quit entirely when I honestly want to? Obsession. Or if when drinking you have little control of the amount you take. Allergy, thank you. If that may be you're probably alcoholic. Likely. In that case, you may be suffering from illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. And that's when a lot of us check out. A lot of us go, they hear the word spiritual and they go, not for me. No, thank you. Okay, but it's the only solution offered in this text. Only a spiritual experience will conquer. You're going to see here, you don't have to believe in anything. You certainly don't believe what I believe, or what Skip believes, or what somebody's been around a while. You can't believe what somebody else believes just because they tell you to. Has to be experienced. So if I have this thing, I'm offered one solution. Chapter 2 of the big book says there is a solution, not one of many. There's a solution. To those, here's the good news though, for those that are closed-minded to this spiritual thing, this God thing, this power greater than myself thing, that I'm the end all and be all. That's called humanism. It's what's killing this country and this world. That means I have to be able to do this myself. I have to get help and do this myself. This is not a self-help book. Not any resemblance to a self-help book. When it's used as one, it will fail. Why? Because I am powerless. That's why trying harder won't work. All these things. Now, I know a lot of you, how many of you have spent months and years and decades maybe trying to fight your way out of this thing? Good news, quit fighting. The more you fight, it won't work. Just accept that fact, you can't do it. In and of yourself, there's no power and there's no way to get out of this. You're doomed. But the only reason I can say that is because there's a solution that's offered. I've experienced it. I know it works. I know these steps work. To one who feels, this is the good news. To one who feels he's an atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible. That's where I was. But to continue as he is means disaster, especially if he's an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. That's this right here. To be doomed to an alcoholic death or live on a spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face. When this book was written, 1939, it went out, and they had a couple of years before the second edition was, for the second printing of the first edition was done. It was like March of 1941, so they had almost 2 years. And in this period of time, Bill Wilson was getting a lot of questions, a lot of phone calls, a lot of from the people who got in the book and were trying to work the steps, because they thought if you read the book that you had to have this, my sponsor calls it a zap job. You had to get struck sober. God had to come in and strike you sober, and you had to have this great religious or spiritual experience. And Bill, that isn't what he intended to say, so he wrote something called the Spiritual Appendix on page 567. Is that right? In the back of the book. I'm going to read through it real quick, and what I want you to see here is how many different times he uses the word change or something that means change. Okay, so read along with me. The terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book. Upon careful reading shows that the personality change, there it is, personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested, has shown up in our lives in many different forms. It's true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes or religious experiences had to be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous. In the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes are described. That's what he calls a spiritual experience. Though it is not our intention to create such an impression, the alcoholic may nevertheless conclude in order to recover, he must acquire an immediate and overwhelming God consciousness, followed at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook. Bill didn't want that to be what you saw here. And a lot of people were asking that question, so he said, I got to explain this thing to them. Among the rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, that's another word for change, though frequent, are by no means a rule. Most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James calls the educational variety, because they develop slowly over a period of time. Quite often, friends, the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. Some of you have talked to me about that. You said you go home and people say, what's happened? Did you change? Did you lose weight? Or why are you in such a good mood? Or what's going on here? You're not the horse's ass you've always been. They say that too, don't they, Jerry? Yeah. And that's a nice one. They see something's happen. You don't even know it. You say, well, I don't know. I've worked those steps, but I don't notice any difference. That's what he's saying here. It could happen. We don't even know it. He finally realizes that there's undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life. That's a change that hardly could have been brought about by himself alone. What often takes place in a few months could seldom be accomplished by years of self-discipline. Stop right there. Self-dash anything. If you're a real alcoholic and addict working this program, anything that has self-dash on it, put it in the trash. Self-confidence won't help you. Self-knowledge won't work. Self-will, you haven't got any. Self-dash, I'm still waiting to hear one that works. Because self implies what?
Power.
that I'm the power, and I can do this, and I can't do it. You'll see this sooner or later, either in your experience when you go back out, or hopefully before that. And you don't have to die. You don't have to live like that anymore. What often takes, with few exceptions, our members find they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource. You might want to underline that one. We'll come back to that again someday. Inner resource they have personally identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. Most of us think this awareness of that power greater than ourselves is the essence of spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it God conscious. Most emphatically wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. We find that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. Willingness, honesty, and open-minded are essentials of recovery, and they're indispensable. Willingness, honesty, and open-minded. I'm pretty much willingness enough. Here's the deal. Living like this gets old, doesn't it? And may say, no, it was great. No, nobody? Yeah, it sucks. And but so does change, doesn't it? I don't know anybody that comes in and says, man, I want to change. No, you don't. You want to be different, but you don't want to change. And we come in, we're looking for a way to escape this thing and with no change in our lives, and it doesn't work that way. It just flat doesn't work. You can't be, you're still the same person, but you're going to have a whole new attitude and outlook upon life. That's what a psychic change is. Your thinking has to change, because all action is born in thought. When my thinking changes, my actions will change. And the catch is, I can't change myself. How many of you have been to strengths trying to get rid of that? Didn't know what it was, but they tried, didn't they? How about doctors saying there's something wrong with my body? I used to go and hope they'd find a brain tumor. No, it would at least explain why I was nuts. Why I was completely crazy. Why those other people are normal and I was crazy. I didn't know why. So there has to be a change. If you have trouble with spiritual experience, spiritual awakening, you can think of personality change sufficient to recover. Maybe that's enough for your conception. Maybe God consciousness. Maybe an awareness of a power greater than myself. Don't get hung up on the point is, don't get hung up on the thought of, oh no, I'm going to have to become one of those people, because that held me up. That was tough. I remember my sponsor, he told me, he took me through showed me the steps, and I said, I can't do this. He went, why not? He was not very loving, never did hug me. But he said, why not? And I said, I don't know how to pray. And he said, I thought he was crazy. He said, you work these steps, Spirit of God will come in your life and teach you how to pray. And I went, he walked off, and I looked at my buddy and I said, he's crazier than hell, isn't he? We thought he was crazy. We thought that was the goofy stuff. And it would just be, and if you're closed-minded to, chances are you're like I was, you're closed-minded to people you know that claim God. Maybe wear it on their sleeves. You've been run off from all of that. You've been church damaged. You know what that is? Yeah. Well, you go to church and you don't feel welcome. In fact, you feel very unwelcome. Or maybe you've been to church and you just got too far out of hand and they told you had to leave. Church huddles going, that's me. How'd you know that? Maybe you're unchurched. Maybe you've never been around anything. All you got's for the little bits and pieces you've heard. But the solution don't get hung up on all these terms. Go to page 45, I think. I think he's going to tell us about that. Lack of power, that was our dilemma. Yes? That's what this is. I have no power. That cycle's how I live, and there's nothing I can do about it. I can't escape it. I'm powerless. Lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be, see the italics again? A power greater than ourselves. That's the solution. Don't get hung up on anything yet. I just said we're powerless. If you agree with that, what's the solution? Obviously has to be some sort of power in my life, and the experience of these people and of myself says there's no power on earth that can give me that power to escape this. No doctors, no psychiatrists, no churches, no religious organizations, nothing can give me that power. That power comes from one place, and that's God, God alone. You can call him whatever you want to. We'll come to that. Don't get hung up just because I wrote God up there. Don't check out on me yet. That's what Bill knew would happen here. That's exactly what this book is about, back on page 45. Its main objects enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. We remember on page 23, we learned the main problem centers where? A power greater than myself that will remove that obsession. That's what a recovered alcoholic looks like from the moment it's removed. Don't get hung up on all the rest of this stuff that goes along with it. When your obsession's removed and you can see the truth in the area of the first drink, because basically, Joe and Charlie used to say, God removes this obsession and he abhors a vacuum, nature does, and so he replaces it with truth. And today I can see the truth in what happens when I take that drink, that I don't have a body that will let me drink like those other people can do. And you know what? It makes no difference, because the life's so much better without that obsession that whatever I had to do would be worth it, or not do. He replaces that obsession with truth. And today I can see the truth in the area of the first drink. And yet, if somebody's in here and just came in today and you probably still have that stuff going on, the only difference between you and I haven't had a drink in decades. And the only difference between us is I can see the truth in the area of the first drink and you can't yet, but we both still have this. That's why you can say once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. This isn't going anywhere. I'll always have that body. And the moment I think I don't have that body and believe the lie, what am I going to do? Go drink? Adios. So long standing by the door. So long, friends. Because I'm not going to care one bit. Not about anybody but me. Where was I? 45? Okay, so don't get discouraged, it says. That means you've written a book which we believe to be spiritual as well as moral. That means truthful. And means, of course, we're going to talk about God. Here, difficulty arises with agnostics. You know what an agnostic is?
Someone believes a higher power, not necessarily God.
Well, no, not really. Someone who believes there is a God or there is something greater than me, but it doesn't make any difference because I can't experience it anyway. I know a lot of agnostic Christians. God, I wish I just wasn't taping. I could tell you about it, but people who claim the book talks about it. To Christ I conceded the certainty of a great man, not too closely followed by those who claimed him. If you think working these steps will make you a member of the church, don't. It's not what it's offering. It's offering a change, a personality change sufficient to recover, an entire psychic change, a change in the way we think, and a change. I'm a true believer because I've had an experience. I've had the experience. I know God's real because of what he's done in my life, not because of what I learned in a book. And that's what this book's about, is how do I find that experience? And that's exactly what happens. So don't get too hung up yet. Many times we talk to the newcomer and watch his hope arise as we discuss his alcoholic problems and explain our fellowship, but his face falls when we speak of spiritual matters, especially when we mention God, right? If we have reopened a subject which our man thought he had neatly evaded or entirely ignored. Here's the key. Here's the key to this whole program, these next words. We know how he feels. When you're working with a newcomer and they're telling you about their stuff, you can have an empathy. You can say, and you can look at them and you can say, I know how you feel because I've been there. That's the greatest asset we have as recovered alcoholics. talk to a new person, hear their story, and say, man, I know how you feel. Because that feeling will never go away. No matter how long you're sober, no matter how far away you get from it, it'll never go away. You'll always remember that I know how you feel. We know how he feels. We have shared his honest doubt and prejudice. And prejudice just means closed-minded. Okay? Prejudice means closed-minded when this book was written. Some of us have been violently anti-religious. I wasn't violent, but I was pretty anti-religious. To others, the word God brought a particular idea to him which someone had tried to impress on them during childhood. Church damage. You may have a drug problem when they're little, got drugged to church all the time. Yeah, that'll do it. Perhaps we rejected this particular conception because it seemed inadequate. With that rejection, we imagined we had abandoned the God idea entirely. We were bothered with the thought that faith and dependence upon a power greater as ourselves was somewhat weak, even cowardly. We looked upon the world of warring individuals, warring theological systems, and inexplicable calamity with deep skepticism. We looked askance. That's kind of like, At many what'd you call it? Side-eyed, okay. At many individuals who claimed to be godly. How could a supreme being have anything to do with it? Who could comprehend a supreme being anyhow? Yet at other moments we found ourselves thinking when enchanted by a starlit night, who made this? It was a feeling of awe and wonder, but it was fleeting and soon lost. Yes, we of agnostic temperament have had these thoughts and experience. Let us make haste to reassure you we have found that as soon as we are able to lay aside closed-mindedness, become willing. That's all it takes. Look, step 2 on the wall says, came to believe. You don't come to believe in step 2. Get that, everybody. I've seen stuff come out of offline AA material that says here's how you take step 2. We'll come to that. There's no closure on step 2. Okay, it's just a second mental conclusion. Command to get rid of, even though it's impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend the power which was God. Much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. Our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and effect a contact with Him. Bill was sitting at home, pretty much had resigned himself to dying of alcoholism, either being locked up or dying. Turn back to page 8, and we'll see what happened. Remember, he had that first piece of information. What's the problem? Now he's about to receive the next 2 pieces of information. At his house on a whatever night it was, I don't remember, here's what happened. Near the end of that bleak November, bottom of the page, I sat drinking in my kitchen with certain satisfaction. I reflected there was enough gin to conceal around the house to carry me through that night and the next day. My wife was at work. Relate to that? Bill's home drunk and Lois is working. Anybody relate to that? Now, my wife's working at Walmart and I can't hold a job longer than 20 minutes. Or the other way around. I wondered whether I dared hide a bottle of gin near the head of my bed. Why would he not want to hide it there? She'll find it, right? I would need it before daylight. Anybody relate to Bill Wilson? I certainly do. My musing, that's what we do best when we're really drunk, don't we? We're musing, thinking, planning, plotting. My musing was interrupted by the telephone. The cheery voice of an old school friend asked if he might come over. See the italics here? That's important. He was sober. It was years since I can remember his coming to New York in that condition. I was amazed. Rumor had it he'd been committed for alcoholic insanity. I wondered how he'd escaped. Of course he would have dinner and then I would drink openly with him. Unmindful of his welfare, I thought only of recapturing the spirit of our other days. There was a time we chartered an airline to complete a JAG. His coming was an oasis in the dreary desert of futility, the very thing an oasis drinkers are like that. Bill, this guy called, his name was Ebby Thatcher. He was a boyhood drink. They drank in college together. They drank on and off together for all these years. And the last he'd heard of Ebby, he'd never seen Ebby come to New York sober, for one thing. And the last he'd heard of Ebby, he was getting ready to be committed to an asylum. That's what they did with alcoholics back then, because he was deemed a threat to himself and other people. He'd driven drunk into a lady's kitchen one morning, and then got out and asked her if he could have a cup of coffee. May relate to that? The airline jag was when they got to remember this 1939. Some of these towns had never seen an airplane. Well, Bill and Ebby are in a bar in New York, and there's a drunk pilot with them. Guy had an airplane, and they decided. Anybody ever relate to this? They decided, let's all go. Let's charter this plane, and we'll fly to our old hometown in Vermont, and we'll call them and tell them we're coming. We'll have a big celebration. Of course, they're dead drunk. The only bad thing that happens, they actually did it. They got in the plane, drunk pilot flying them. They came landing. The town had turned out with a full band. The town band was there playing. They decorated. It's going to be a big, they'd never seen an airplane in this town. And the thing landed, and I picture it going boing, bouncing down the runway. Finally came to a stop, and they opened the door, and Bill and Ebby passed out drunk on the ground. Welcome home. Another proud moment for Mom, wasn't it? Anybody relate to Bill and Ebby? Yeah. Dumb shit we do, isn't it? Anybody else ever look back and go, what was I thinking? What the hell was I thinking about? Okay, so Ebby shows up, and this is a big deal for Bill. Bill later wrote, Ebby was a worse drunk than I was. For him to show up sober, I didn't know what was going on. The door opened, he stood there fresh-skinned and glowing. Something about his eyes, inexplicably different. What had happened? I pushed a drink across the table. He refused it. Disappointed but curious, I wondered where they'd gotten with the fellow. He wasn't himself. Come, what's this about? I asked. He looked straight at me. Smiling, simply but smiling, he said, I've got religion. Bill said he was aghast. Truth is, he probably wanted to throw up. You ever had that happen to you?
Yeah.
That's last summer. That was it. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. Now I expect a little cracked about religion. He had that starry-eyed look. Yeah, the old boy was on fire, all right, but bless his heart. Let him rant. My gin would last longer than his preaching. So Bill's mind immediately snapped shut. He heard, I got religion. He went, I'm out of here. Said, not interested. He had to just be thinking, oh boy, well, at least I'll be more gin for myself. Bathtub gin and pineapple juice is what they're drinking, if that sounds really good to anybody. Really rot gut gin and pineapple juice. The best way to describe it. Here's the key. Key for you when you're carrying this message to somebody else. Bill said, but he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told me how 2 men had appeared in court persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. They had told of a simple religious idea and practical program of action. That was 2 months ago, and the result was evident it worked. He'd come to pass his experience along to me if I cared to have it. I was shocked, but interested. Certainly I was interested. I had to be, for I was hopeless. Remember, Bill had taken step one. He didn't have any hope. He knew he didn't have any power. He knew he wasn't going to ever have any power. He said, I'm doomed. So, and he was just drinking to die. To read his story, he wasn't having fun anymore. He was just drinking because he had to, not because he wanted to or needed to. So they talked for a while, and Ebby wasn't really hammering him with this religious thing. He wasn't saying, you got to believe like I believe. He wasn't saying, come and join my church. He was just there telling him his story. And we'll talk about that in a second. But Bill finally boiled down to, I can't believe what you believe. He wanted to argue. You ever been one of those people that wanted to argue religion with everybody? Now, I could argue for and against God. Had no frickin' idea what I was talking about, but I sounded really good at the bar to myself anyway doing it. And you ever been in those bar room conversations, theological conversations? Oh man, it used to be fun. Even better if you smoked a lot of pot before you did it too. Then you could talk about picking up the rock and all that stuff for those that know what I'm talking about. I guess I'm aging myself. Go to the middle of page 12. Ebby said, we're going to do this different. My friend then suggested what seemed a novel idea. why don't you choose your own conception of God, Bill? Bill had to go, huh? They told me that. Came to believe in a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. But what do you mean my own conception? I didn't have a conception. A lot of us don't have any conception. Or the conception we have is bad. So he just said, pick out your own conception, Bill. Then you don't have to argue with me. Look what happened to Bill. He said, that statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain whose shadow I had lived and shivered for many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. Italics again. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required for me to make my beginning. I saw that growth could start at that point upon a foundation of complete willingness. I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it? Of course I would. Thus I was convinced that God is concerned with humans when we want Him enough. At long last, I saw, I felt, I believed, scales of pride and prejudice fell from my eyes. A new world came into view. Okay, Ebby had carried Bill the rest of the information he needed to recover. Ebby didn't know this. He didn't have this. Bill had it. Ebby didn't stay sober. We don't know about Roland. We don't know about the Oxford group. And we'll come to that too. But he carried him a solution, which is nothing more than a willingness to believe in a power greater than myself. I can take step 2. And then he gave him the information of how to find that solution through the working of, at that time it would have been, the Oxford group was a first, are you ready for this? First century Christian fellowship, worldwide, practicing fundamental, basic Christianity. I mean, they were Pentecostal in spades. They were strict. And they weren't exclusive to alcoholics and addicts. They wanted anybody to come. And they were pretty strong at that time in New York City. And Ebby had gone to court, and these two people interceded and said, we'll take him. And they took him back to New York and put him in this program. And Ebby was practicing one of those steps of the Oxford group when he came to see Bill. It was called witnessing. They don't call it witnessing anymore. It's called carry the message. But that's what he was doing. He came to find, and I don't know if maybe you've ever done that, but it's uncomfortable with somebody you don't know sometimes, especially early on. So you find some guy you knew, it won't beat you up when you try to talk to him, and that's what he was doing with Bill. Read his autobiography, it's pretty interesting. So go to page, and so where did Ebby get this information? Page 26. We know that he's already told us that the Oxford group was a religious group. He got the step 1 from medicine. He got step 2 from actually psychology. We're going to see that in a second. And he got the program from religion. And this Oxford group had been around a long time. Bill Wilson himself said it all started on a psychiatrist's couch in Zurich, Switzerland. Early 20s, way before Bill got sober. I'm sorry, early 30s, late 20s. Turn to page 26 and we'll find out what happened with Ebby. A certain American businessman had ability, good sense, and high character. Philip relates to that. Don't you? Ability, good sense, and high character? Yeah, see, he said he did. For years he had floundered from one sanitarium to another. Philip relates to that too, I think. He had consulted, that's why they called them sanitariums back then and asylums. They changed it to treatment centers because nobody wanted to go if it was called a sanitarium or a treatment center or an asylum. So treatment center sounded better because it sounded like they'd treat you. They treat you. They don't lock you up and throw away the key like they did back then. He had consulted the best-known American psychiatrist. Then he'd gone to Europe, placing himself care of the celebrated physician, the psychiatrist Dr. Jung, one of the founders of modern psychiatry, who prescribed for him. Though experience made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Above all, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. He'd spent a year in this guy's care, probably every day, 4 or 5 times a week, being treated by one of the founders of modern psychiatry, and who told him all about how his brain worked and all about how his body worked and everything he knew about it and why he had to stop drinking and all this information and he gave him, and he left there going, I got her going. I got it going on now. Probably strutting back to the ocean liner, and they got on the ocean liner and came back. Guess what? Self-knowledge didn't fix him. Self-knowledge failed. Look what happened. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. I'll tell you what a short time is. He was drunk before the boat docked in New York. He was drunk before he landed back. So more baffling, he could himself no explanation. So he returned to the doctor. He immediately got back on the boat and went back to Switzerland. Returned to Switzerland because he admired the doctor, asked him point blank why he could not recover. He wished above all things to regain self-control. He seemed quite rational and well balanced with respect to other problems. He had no control whatever over alcohol. Why was this? He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. He could never regain his position in society, would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. This was the great physician's opinion. But the man still lives as a free man. He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on earth other free men can go, provided he remains willing to maintain a certain simple attitude. Some of our alcoholic readers think they may do without spiritual help. I'll tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with the doctor. Dr. Jung talking to Roland. The guy's name's Roland Hazard. He said, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I have never seen one single case recover. No, I've never seen one single case recover where the state of mind existed to the extent it does in you. That's this. So Dr. Jung said, here's your recovery chances. And he's telling us the same thing. If we have this, he's telling us the same thing. Because he said, I can't fix you, Roland. Something's in there and I can't change it. I can't override it. I can't, no matter how much I talk and how much we work on it, it's not going to work. 0.0%. My friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. He said, doctors are no exception. Yes, replied the doctor, exceptions such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here you go. Here's your chance without a planned program of recovery. Here and there once in a while. So his rate just went from 0.0 to here and there once in a while. Sound good? A waste. I wouldn't seek that. Unless I won 4 lotteries in a row, I'd think I'm probably not going to have any luck with this. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics had what are called, here it is, vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. Phenomena is something he has heard of it happening, he's seen it happen, but there's no explanation for it. They'd appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes which were once the guiding force of the lives of these men were suddenly cast to one side, and a complete new set of conceptions and motives began to dominate them. Complete change of thinking. That's what that is. No longer can I think the same way and expect to get sober. And I cannot change myself. How many of us have tried to change ourselves? Okay, I'm going to do it different. New ethics. I'm going to live this way from now on. Here's my new philosophy of life. Here's how I'm going to do it. And then, if you're like me, it lasts about 10 minutes. Some people make it better than that, but I wasn't very good. I'm pretty selfish. In fact, I've been trying to produce such an emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, the methods I employed are successful, but I've never been successful. Never been successful with an alcoholic of your description. I've never been successful, he said, with one of you. Obsession, allergy. Young didn't know all this, but he knew about this, and he said, there's something in your head that I don't relate to, I can't understand, I don't get. Normal people will never understand your obsession, how powerful it is or how strong it is to use alcohol and drugs. And they just don't get it and don't try to explain it. Doesn't do any good. No. It's the old story about never try to teach a pig to sing. You know that one? Waste your time and annoys the pig. With many individuals, the method I employed is successful. I've never been successful at any alcoholic of your description. Your description is in the back of the book. He puts a footnote in here to go back to the appendix. Upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that he was a good church member. But he struggled with that one? Going to church and trying to get sober and trying to figure this out. And you're sitting there in that room full of people and they're singing and praising. And you're going through the motions thinking, why can't I be like these people? Because you aren't, because there's something up here. And you got to remember, you're comparing your insides with their outsides, so don't get too hung up on it. This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctors telling him why his religious convictions were very good. In this case, they did not spell the necessary, vital, spiritual experience. One more paragraph. This was a terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself when he had the extraordinary experience which we've already told you made him a free man. He went back and got connected with the Oxford group in New York City. There was a chapter of these people practicing this thing. They met every night. They practiced 6 steps and 4 absolutes. They were unwritten. They were just a word-of-mouth program. And it was helping these people. And it happened to help Roland. And Roland went with another guy named Seaber Grays, and they were the ones that stepped into court and took Ebby. You think the big book's not a story of what I call providential circumstances? You got this thing going in Switzerland 10 years before the book's written. You got this boyhood drinking friend who was a worse drinker than Bill. You got Bill who's hopeless. You got all these things going on, and they're all coming together now. It's like a storm coming to one spot, because here's Bill. He had the first piece of information. He was powerless. He had an obsession of mind, coupled an allergy to the body, and now his old boyhood drinking buddy carries him a message from no more than, the guy drank like Bill or worse than Bill, no more than from the father, one of the founders of modern psychiatry, the solution, and then how to find this solution from religion. AA is nothing unique. Set up by providential circumstances, God was bringing it all together. Couldn't see it at the time, but all of a sudden Bill Wilson had these 3 pieces of information necessary to recover. We, in our turn, we sought the same escape, the desperation of drowning men. What seemed a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us, or if you prefer, a design for living that really works. That's mentioned at least twice in the book. Design for living that really works. So there's a set of these directions, specific, precise, and clear-cut directions on the action I have to take to go from having no power to having power. No power to having power. How do I get there? That's what the rest of the steps are about. That's what this book was written about. It's not written about how not to drink. It's written about how to allow God to change you. And you don't have to get hung up on the God thing. How do I take step 2? Turn to page 47. I get asked that a lot. Well, I'm hung up on step 2. And I go, what? You're hung up on, I can see step 1, you got a little information. Step 2, here's how you take step 2. If some of you are sitting here going, thinking you have to believe what I believe, or you have to believe what Kim believes, or you have to believe what your parents told you to believe. It's not what it is at all. The Religious pluralism of this program is the key. It's the gift. It's a gift we've all been given. Because if I came in and they told me, here's what you have to believe, I didn't have the power to believe that. I'd say, sorry, I just got to die. You don't have to believe nothing. You don't have to believe one thing or have faith in anything to take step 2. Here's what you do have to have. Are you willing to believe? Why was I willing to believe? Because I had a guy with about 6 years sobriety come in and he talked out of this book and he showed me what my problem was. And he deepened my dilemma. He made sure that I couldn't think, and I'd watch people die of this and thinking that's what I'm stuck with. And he said there's a way out. Go to the bottom of page 17. We're about done. See it? Now we'll come back to that next week. Tremendous fact for each one of us. What's it say? We have discovered a way out, a common solution. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree, upon which we can join in brotherly harmonious action. That's the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. What do I have to do to take step 2? I have to be willing to believe that there's a power greater than myself that can reach into my mind and expel this obsession. Do I know it? Absolutely not. I can't know it. When you're right here where you are and some of you are brand new, it's an experiment. And I always look at this. What do you got to lose? If life's going so well you don't need to recover, why are you here? I doubt if it is. And if you're stuck in that thing and you're sick of it to a point of being willing to do whatever it takes, the big book talks about willing to go to any lengths. Come back next week. We'll talk about step 3 and get started on step 4. And you guys have been great. Thank you very much.